What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking some college basketball. Today is Friday, February the 14th. We have a short slate, as is the case generally with Fridays. Got a lot of Ivy League, Horizon, Big Ten plays every day, so we've got a Big Ten on the top of the end. But let's go back, talk about the previous day before we get into Friday's action. Yesterday, pretty good day for predictions, pretty entertaining day. Walked into a little bit of luck, but we started out the card talking about Maryland taking on Nebraska. We took the points with Maryland at the time. And Nebraska, a little bit of a sickness going through their team. Bryce Williams and Connor Essegian played. How effective were they with the sickness? I don't know. But we walked into a little bit of positive variance there with the Maryland side. I still think they were the better team. That wasn't a particularly close game. Nebraska was able to hang in there, but still not one that was ever really a concern. From there, we talked about a couple greasy games on the stream. Delaware covered the 9.5 against Towson. Northern Colorado smashed Sacramento State, the worst team in the Big Sky, so that's not really all that surprising. As far as the other big games that we saw play out on yesterday's slate, Gonzaga did get the win over San Francisco on their home floor. Big, important win for them as they sort of flounder a little bit. I don't know, that's not exactly the right word. They're a pretty solid tournament team, but unlike most years, we're looking at them maybe more towards like a 7-8 range rather than a 1-2 or a 3. But getting a win over San Fran is great. They didn't cover, wasn't one I pulled the trigger on, but we did show value on San Francisco, which was solid. And then ended up adding Memphis late. That was one where Tyrese Hunter got ruled in and the line didn't change inexplicably. And they ended up beating USF pretty soundly. A couple other winners in Discord. But it was a fun night of basketball overall, as is tonight's slate. Before we get there, quick, if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. Just want to say that because we will be talking about betting on this show, at least a little bit. It's not the best card. Again, it's a short slate, so I don't show a lot of value. Generally, that's what happens. You go from having like 50-plus games on most of these weeknights to, a dozen on Friday, a little bit more than that. So just fewer spots overall. But there are some fun games up top, and we'll go to the Big Ten where they play every day now, which I'll take. Love the Big Ten. UCLA's got to go across the country to face Indiana, who is a somewhat hot team. UCLA extremely streaky. This is a 1.5-point spread in favor of UCLA. The total in the game is 140. There's no major injuries on either side. The biggest wrinkles in this game, I think, are just travel and recency bias on the travel stuff. UCLA has to go a couple time zones, of course. They've been horrifying when they've had to do that this year. They still have yet to win a road game in conference play outside their time zone. The road games they won were against like USC and other West Coast teams. They have had to travel to Maryland, Rutgers, Nebraska, and Illinois, and they lost all those games. So what do we get out of UCLA here? Because I do show them up, at least so far this season, as the better team. Conversely, on the Indiana side, if you go all the way back to November, I don't think anyone would really bat an eye at ranking Indiana ahead of UCLA based on their roster. So that's the recency bias thing. This team is awesome. They just have played horribly this season. However, they got all the coaching stuff going on, and then they go to Michigan State's building and beat the first place team in the conference. I think that looks a little more impressive on paper than maybe it actually is. Michigan State has played an incredibly easy conference schedule to this point, and they're starting to get into the teeth of it now. A team that's overachieved based on their talent versus the exact opposite in Indiana that's underachieved. So it's tough to evaluate this game based on the travel, based on the talent that Indiana has not been capable of using. But to get to the X's and O's, Indiana actually doesn't have a bad loss this year, in my opinion. They just have a lot of them. They have 10 to be exact. And their worst ones are against probably Iowa, number 62 in the country. And 7 of their losses are against top 25 teams in terms of efficiency. Whenever I say top 25, I'm not talking about whatever nonsense the AP puts out every week. I'm talking about like true power rated top 25 teams. 7 of their losses are against the top 25 teams. So Is Indiana actually as bad as this record indicates, as bad as the public would have you believe? I don't think so. The problem is, like, they just can't shoot. They're awesome in the front court. This is an extremely tall team. It's Umar Ballo, Malik Renome, Mackenzie Mbako, who shoots a fair amount of threes. Not that well, but he will shoot them. They're awesome in the front court. They're just not a team that can shoot whatsoever. The only player on their team, at least with a large enough sample, that shoots threes above 31% is Luke Goody. And he is just a complete liability on the defensive end. So there's like trade-offs with this team. It's like, okay, do you play your stud defenders and sacrifice shooting and just have to force it down low every single play? Or do you play Luke Goody, who gives you a little bit of floor spacing and can shoot the three, but he's just a complete sieve on defense? Those are the questions they've had to wrestle with this year. And recently their answer has just been, screw it, we need Goody on the floor, defense be damned. As far as how UCLA matches up against this, I do think teams with big dynamic forwards are going to give them problems. That's happened to them a few times this year. Michigan, who's probably more dynamic than Indiana, their bigs are 7 feet tall and they can shoot. But still, UCLA struggled to defend them. They also struggled against Maryland, who has a very talented front court. They rank 189th in interior defense. That's not the greatest statistic to line up against Ballo, Renault, and Mbako. But on the other side, UCLA is just way better at shooting. And now this is kind of crazy to say because they're still 84th in two-point percentage, 153rd in three-point percentage. That's only Eric Daly and Tyler Bilodeau shooting above 37% from three. Who are those players? Well, Daly's kind of a wing. He's like a 20, 25 minute per game guy. And Bilodeau basically is playing their center most of the time. So those are your best three-point shooters. It's not exactly the best matchup. There are advantages on the periphery for UCLA. This is the number one turnover team in the country. Currently, it sort of ebbs and flows with teams like Marquette. But turnovers are a massive problem for Indiana. This team is terrible ball handling. With that said, other micro advantages Indiana's way. We mentioned the height. They should have an advantage on the glass. I'm not sure if UCLA is forced to play a larger lineup. You know, Bilodeau missed that game with an ankle, and Ade Mara had to play quite a bit, and he played well. Since then, he's just seen his role decrease and decrease, 10 minutes and 8 minutes last two games. I'm not sure why, but that is the case. Ultimately, we do have a little bit of value here on the UCLA side at -1.5. I'm nervous about the road trip and Indiana's recent play. Probably not what I'm going to end up taking, but we'll watch this throughout the day, see if there's any injuries, anything like that. One thing I do like in this game is in the prop market, Tyler Bilodeau, 3.5 rebounds. They're going to have to play some bigger guys in this contest to contend with Indiana on the glass. Bilodeau is not their best rebounder on the team, but 3.5 is a very generous number here for him. He averages well over that in his minutes this year. Second game, we're going to go to the 8-10, where we have St. Louis taking on Loyola. This is a pretty good game in this conference. You know, up at the top of the 8-10, I'm not sure if they're going to get any. They're going to have the auto bid. I don't know if they're live for any at-larges or anything like that, but, I mean, it would be kind of cool to see this conference get in a couple teams. One of them I think would be interesting is St. Louis, and it's just this team has not played up to expectation this year. They've taken 11 losses. They're fourth in the conference right now. George Mason's number 1, VCU 2, Dayton 3. But, you know, like St. Louis is a very talented roster, similar to Indiana, where I'm just a little bit surprised at what they put on the floor. To get to this game, St. Louis is a 2.5-point underdog on the road at Loyola Chicago. The total is 140. A couple injuries in the periphery for both teams. St. Louis, Kellen Thames, Larry Hughes, AJ Casey, Josiah Dotsler. Loyola, it's Justin Moore. But, I mean, all this really comes down to is St. Louis playing to their talent. It's basically the Indiana State roster from last year. They've lost their last two games. This is what it comes down to, in my opinion. They just need more than Robbie Avila. They just flat out do. And they have some players that you would expect more from. They're role players. Isaiah Swope, Gibson, Jimerson. Isaiah Swope is 9 of 26 from the floor in the last two games. Gibson Jimerson is 6 of 22. Like, they're just not going to win games if these players don't hit more shots, just flat out. And you look at this team overall and individually, Swope is shooting worse than last year. Jimerson is shooting worse than last year. Even Avila, who's their best player, is still shooting worse than last year. Now, they played at Indiana State, so perhaps the 8-10 is a little bit of a step too far for these players. Or are they due for positive shooting regression? I think you could argue this both ways. They're 31st in effective field goal percentage, which is still pretty good. 4th at two-point percentage. That's the Avila effect. 183rd from three. That is where players like Swope and Jimerson need to play better. Now, Loyola is 84th in interior defense. They're 169th at defending the three. So there may be more avenues to hitting three-point shots in this contest. We'll see how that goes for this St. Louis team, but I think that's what we need for them to win this game is just positive regression shooting. On the margins, just about everything favors Loyola, which is scary. Rebounding favors Loyola, which I don't understand because St. Louis actually plays the taller lineup and Avila is supposed to be, stud down low. It is what it is. Turnovers first versus turnovers committed or turnover margin. That favors Loyola as well, who's been better at ball handling. Loyola is actually the much better team scoring inside. They're 81st in interior scoring, 169th from the perimeter. St. Louis plays better defense in the half court, I guess. But they're just giving teams so many chances to score because they're forcing no turnovers. So it's a tough matchup for St. Louis in that regard. I'm still experiencing a little bit of sticker shock with this St. Louis team after preseason expectations, seeing them as a dog price even on the road. That's where I tend to lean, which we actually show, like the slightest of value Loyola Chicago's direction in the modeling. So a little bit of an IKB spot, which is why I can't take it. But this is one where I think you could potentially look at Loyola Chicago if you have the balls for it. Going to our next game, this is where it gets fun. The Ivy League, Columbia, and Dartmouth showdown. I won't lie, the Ivy League is a little greasy today. We basically have the top of the conference playing the bottom of the conference. This is the last place team in Columbia taking on number 4, Dartmouth. There's only 8 teams in the Ivy League, but it's closer than every other spread in the Ivy League tonight. And I think part of the reason is Columbia is probably not actually the 8th ranked team in this conference. They're just pretty banged up. Before we get there, the spread in this particular game comes in at 1.5 points in favor of Dartmouth. The total is 161.5. And if you're just looking for fireworks, I'm not sure what network this is on, but if you're pulling up, some deep streaming platforms, these teams are both top 40 in pace. They're going to run. It's going to be an exciting offensive game, a fun one if you're trying to get a pulse on the Ivy League this year, who Yale is the front runner for those of you curious. But anyway, aside from the total, the biggest story in this game is injuries. Columbia has many of them. Geronimo Rubio De La Rosa. He's their best player. He was the 6th most efficient player in this conference prior to his injury. He's been out of Columbia's lineup, and reporting is really bad for the Ivy League. Do not expect an update. He hasn't been out that long, so there is a chance he could return at some point. I just flat out don't know. And Noah Robledo, he's also been out for Columbia too. Dartmouth is fully healthy. So we have a bunch of injury concerns with Columbia that's coincided with them dropping some games. Just to get into Columbia's overall body of work, they do have a non-con win over Villanova. I mean, this is just a monster performance. And, it was basically on the back of De La Rosa, who put up 22 points in that game. He's now missed 3 contests. And that's definitely contributed to Columbia's 1-6 conference record. So his injury can't be overstated. As far as the individual statistics in this game, Columbia is 183rd in effective height. Dartmouth is 304th. That gives Columbia a rebounding and edge inside, scoring-wise. They're also just the better shooting team overall, but I'm a little worried about that because, again, De La Rosa, 44% three-point shooter, he did so much of that. But at the end of the day, this team still should be able to score inside. Like, just for reference, De La Rosa is a 6'2 guard. He has nothing to do with that interior advantage. So at least they hold that. But then you look at Dartmouth, they're just way better than Columbia defensively. It's kind of a clash of styles where Columbia can score, but they can't defend. Dartmouth can't really score that well, but they're pretty good at defending. 185th in total defense. Columbia is 338th. So, Dartmouth, 200th in effective field goal. They're still 85th in three-point percentage. It's not terrible. Columbia is 364th in perimeter defense. So, yeah, there should be avenues for Dartmouth shooting the ball just straight up over the top of Columbia. This team is absolutely atrocious on defense. We currently make this about -2-ish in favor of Dartmouth. And it's tough because of the injury information. I would have interest in Columbia if this came down to De La Rosa being in, but we just don't know that information. If he's out, I would take Dartmouth right now. It's going to be a pause for me. I'm probably going to take this game as it gets closer to tip-off, but we'll need to see one way or another what the injuries hold for this contest. And last thing, Dartmouth did already play Columbia. They won 95-89. That was in Columbia's building on February 1st, so just 2 weeks ago. However, Dartmouth did shoot 67% from three. They did make the game close unnecessarily by turning it over 16 times. But yeah, I mean, they're not going to shoot 67% from three again, but it just speaks to Dartmouth's inability to even contest a three-point shot. We'll lean Dartmouth -1.5 pending the injury information. All right, last game we'll talk today. We'll go to my favorite hometown team, UW-Milwaukee. I guess one quick thing before we get there, this channel is new. We are only 969 subscribers away from me being able to not be broke anymore. If you do find this interesting at all, subscribing, liking the video, comments, they do help a lot. If you've done that and taken the time to, first of all, watch this video and then do any of those things to help me out, I can't thank you enough. It really, truly does mean a lot as we try to grow this from ground zero. But let's go to the Horizon League. Part of the reason why I love Friday nights, a league near and dear to my heart. The hometown UW-Milwaukee is always going to get a piece of this show whenever we can potentially talk about them. It's a 5.5-point spread in favor of the home team, UW-Milwaukee. Total's 153.5 and coming down. Pace is pretty good in this game, but scoring is a little bit lackluster for these two teams, especially Milwaukee at times. But this is a rematch. These teams played on January 22nd. That was in Wright State's building. UW-Milwaukee took that game 95-79. Very much an outlier shooting night for UW-Milwaukee in that contest. They hit 46% of their threes. More on that right now. Wright State, they do hold a shooting advantage on the season. They're 36th in effective field goal. Milwaukee is 163rd, so that is definitely middling in terms of shooting. The largest gap within the effective field goal percentage comes from three. Wright State is 16th. UW-Milwaukee is 252nd in three-point percentage, making that 46% outing in their first contest even crazier. Aside from shooting, which Wright State certainly holds an advantage, but Milwaukee was able to do it in the first matchup. Milwaukee does have a lot of advantages, particularly inside. Milwaukee's so much bigger than Wright State. They're 170th in effective height. And that doesn't even matter all that much because their guards are so good at rebounding. But Wright State is 308th in effective height. That gap you see in height certainly extends to the glass, where Milwaukee just wins largely off pure effort. They're out rebounding everyone in this conference. They're third in the country in total rebounding, third in the country. This team is electric on the glass. They're over 100 spots ahead of Wright State in total defense as well. And they're really good at defending the three. We mentioned Wright State being a pretty good three-point shooting team. Milwaukee's inside the top 100, pressuring opponents and altering their shots. Aside from, let's look at other ways Wright State might be able to win. There's so many advantages in Milwaukee's direction. Size, that should lead to path scoring near the rim, rebounding, size, that all helps them. If they're forced to shoot from three, that could be a problem. And the only other thing that has gotten Milwaukee in trouble this year is turning the ball over. They are bottom 50 in turnovers committed. This team will turn it over. Fortunately for them in this matchup, Wright State is bottom 50 at forcing turnovers. It's a bad defense. They don't force any turnovers. It wasn't a problem in the first game, so I don't anticipate it being a problem in this contest. There isn't as much value on the spread. Now that the line has moved, we saw Milwaukee open up as a 6-point favorite, so there was potentially some value on Wright State. That's sort of neutralized at this point. Maybe you could, we make this like essentially minus 5.6. So there might be a sliver of value on UW-Milwaukee, but we still do have this coming slightly under. 153, not as much value as the 154 it opens. I hesitate to make this an official play. I even hesitated at 154, given what we saw Milwaukee do in this first matchup. And we know the pace is going to be pretty decent anytime Milwaukee steps on the floor, and their aggression is going to lead to a lot of offensive boards and stuff like that. But that'll do it for the 4-pack. Only going to do 4 today and spend the rest of our time getting ready for the Monster Slate on Saturday. Thank you guys for watching. Again, it's not lost on me that you take away time out of your day to view this, so thank you. But we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you next time.